Well, again,
It's really
Vitality is
impressive.
a team that was actually really struggling in the early game, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
now they can kind of wait out any. So we can talk about Vitality as well because they're a huge story. Clearly, they look really likely to make the playoffs now. It'd be hard for them to get dropped out, especially. I mean, their last week's tough. It's against SK, who is no slouch, Fnatic and Rogue.
Yeah, but they've beaten so many good teams. Like, how can you count them out at this point? Like, there's almost no one they can't beat, as far as I can tell.
Right. And the thing about it too is that if they take out SK, they're going to be sitting really pretty in terms of the standings. And I think they probably win at least one of those games, right? Which puts them at 10 wins. Vitality, though, they were struggling in the early game, and the way they were winning was by pulling out some of these late game opportunities. It rarely would come together for them enough, but they've turned. I thought they would never turn this corner, but honestly, like, their early game looks a lot better. Haru, especially on the Jarvan, has had much better synergy with the solo lanes.
Laners actually follow him in the jungle now. They can actually do invades and everything. It's amazing. I know.
people were blaming like a lot of issues, I think, with Vitality previously, or saying it was Haru's fault. But Haru was not getting help from Alfarian perks. Like, let's be very clear. Like, he was not getting help. So it was like Haru was operating independently in much the same way that Razork was kind of operating independently from the rest of his team. There were similarities between Vitality and Fnatic in that way. But now, Vitality,
by the way, now if you're a fan, you know why we always bang on about the Razork topic. Because anytime you have a super team and the jungler's disconnected from the team, that's the number one thing you have to fix. Because as you see here, dude, it's not even like Haru's like the best jungler. He's just slightly better, and that's all that matters. Slightly better is enough to make the whole team look better. They look twice as good, guys.
Yeah,
it's crazy,
because they at least always had some level of late game threat that they could pull out.
Dude, that's the most underrated part about the team. In my opinion, the reason why Vitality individually looked so shit is because they were always behind in every game. Think about it. League of Legends, the game, gives the person ahead in gold better stats and power in the game. So the problem is, it doesn't matter if you have a super team. If you're always playing from behind, you're going to lose a lot of those games. Just logical, isn't it?
Yeah. And so they did lose to Astralis this last week, which obviously I think really hurt them. If they had won that game, they would have been in a much more comfortable position when it comes to playoffs. And they did kind of throw that game a little bit. So I guess it was kind of disappointing. But Vitality still, I'm not totally sold on this team, especially with a rough week ahead. They may be able to squeak into playoffs in a similar situation as they did last split, kind of in 5th, 6th place. But this team still could be dangerous in a best of 5 with the players that they have. Just like we couldn't necessarily instantly count them out of spring split playoffs. I don't think you can do that here either. And after the last few weeks, you have to say that they look like they have finally addressed some of the issues that they had, which I thought was just never going to happen with this roster. And I don't know what the cause of it is that they were able to fix this, but it seems like they have, which is good because everybody would rather have a strong Vitality. Vitality, if they can get their shit together, could be a very intimidating team at the World Championship based on the strength of their individual roster. And certainly is one. I want to see Alfarian perks at Worlds. I do want to see that.
I mean, by default, one of the reasons why I always thought Vitality was so underwhelming is because it's like, you know, all the fans who were like, where's Perks doing all this amazing shit? Why was he supposed to? Like, they've lost the game, you idiots. Like, it's not season 3. You can't just 1v9 the game. So, like, the problem is, essentially, they've never given him a platform to actually win some of these fucking games. So, obviously, you want Perks at Worlds. He's one of those clutch players of all time, isn't he? So, and Alfari hasn't been to that many. So, like, yeah, the actual narratives are great for most of the players. The only problem I have is with the way LEC is right now, and with the way every 2 to 3 weeks there's just this mad shift in like power, and people go up and they go down. Who, by the time Worlds comes, God only knows if these will even be the right teams from Europe. Like,
yeah,
this is the biggest crapshoot I've ever seen for LEC. It's crazy.
And also, it's not a good thing. There are different ways. Sometimes you look at a league and you say, oh, wow, all these teams are trading victories. They have very distinct styles. That's what's causing, mismatches in style are creating these upsets. Yep. But you can see like how a team is very good at one specific thing. And that's true to a degree here. But a lot of this is throws, guys. And I would say that overall Europe, because we haven't had a team be able to be consistently dominant. And Excel's a great example of this. They come off strong, really strong off of their boot camp in Korea, and now they're 0-4 in the last.
I mean,
2
the
weeks.
joke is Mad Lions was supposed to be that team until last week. Like when they were 10-3,
Yeah,
everything was great, and they were the one team that had cracked it. We were all okay. And the joke is even they just fucking slipped on the banana peel twice and then fucked it up, haven't they? Like every single, because as you say, that's the problem, Monty. Here's the thing: the standings could look the same if it was like this, Monty. Well, Mad Lions beat Rogue every time because Mad Lions has a better early game, but then the XL lost to Vitality because if you did it like that, like as you say, if there was a reason for each result, doesn't matter. The problem here is if you look who beat who and when, it almost is like some randomizer. It's right. Like that Mad Lions one I watched. On paper, Mad Lions are supposed to just beat Rogue. They just fucking lost the game consistently. It was ridiculous.
They lost from basically minute one in that game.
Ridiculous,
they got absolutely stomped.
By the way, this is why also, as analysts, we hate best of ones. Because imagine if you'd just done like a 20-minute setup of the game of the week, like we've got Rogue here against Mad Lions. Mad Lions has the best early, and then the game just starts, and from the second one, they're just behind the whole game, and they never do anything. Like, it just ruined the whole fucking setup, didn't it? I know.
and it's also the way that some of these teams lose. So you look at, here's another example. XL versus G2 this last week. It was the Neela Tarek game that XL played. They get a really good kind of early game advantage, and then they dive mid-turret without Tarek ult up. They completely wipe, and then they end up falling behind and sacrificing their entire lead in this game. Or Mad Lions, for example, where they're playing this game, they're puttering along, they actually win an early fight onto the Herald, they get the Herald, and then they just don't use it because they're macroing so badly, they don't put people into the correct lanes, so they never use the first Herald of the game, they're never able to snowball their lead, and Rogue just takes over. So there are a lot of really terrible mistakes that are being made in terms of macro right now that are causing teams not to snowball advantages that they get in the early game appropriately that are concerning. Like, you shouldn't be confused about how to win a Herald fight and then use the next several minutes to set up a Herald charge onto plates. Like, there shouldn't be a scenario where you just don't use the Herald. And that's what we're seeing. So, I mean, I'm sure the teams are frustrated with a lot of these mistakes as well. But these are not the kind of errors that you're going to be able to make against good Asian teams in Worlds. And
I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of a game where I was thinking of these topics. It was actually in the Rogue versus Mad Lions game. Because in that game, there was a point right near the end there, Monty, where it was looking like, oh, fucking Rogues like regress. They're going to do that shit where you just wait, bleed away the lead, it gets even, and you just have one big team fight and you lose. But somehow they actually, it's almost like they just accidentally tripped over and won the game. Like, they were looking like they were going to do that. Because that's the problem I have, basically, is this is the real problem in Europe. Even though everyone's done the opposite, Monty, they've all obsessed about the early game. We've had all these people bragging about the Mad Lions early game and then the Rogue early game. No, the main problem right now is the mid game. The problem is this: even Mad Lions, once they got to that mid game, could throw. We all knew that. So my issue is I look at the top LEC teams, mate, and aside from when XL early in the split were living off that fucking high off their own supply shit of being at the boot camp, most teams don't seem to know how to close the game out. Like, it gets mad for. It looks like they just get into a holding pattern where they know, like, right, try and take this Baron, take this fucking Dragon, but that's it. That's all they can do. A lot of them seem like they're just a bit lost in the game. I think also something's changed about that they don't use the word anymore because they overused it, but the fucking tempo of the game has changed.
Well, it has, because so LEC and LCS are on 12-14, which is when the
Isn't it wild that word's never used anymore, by the way, considering, like, obviously if you go to 2016, there was every other word was the word tempo, wasn't it? Like, they never even say it now. It's never ever said now. I know.
I actually think it's a valuable term.
It's good.
Tempo is one thing. I actually don't agree with the. I guess it's the idea is, the metaphor is that they're setting the tempo. What I would use, the word I would use instead is priority, like prio, which I think is a better term for it, because it basically means which team at any given point has the move first advantage. If it was kind of a turn-based game, which means that they're dictating the pace of the game, or they're dictating their opponent's reactions. I think that's having prio is generally a better term, although that's usually referred to as to in the laning in League of Legends, it's usually referred to as when a player has control over their lane and can move first out of the lane. But it also is like who has priority over an objective, who's there first, who has the wave set up better, who has vision control.
Oh, I know what you mean, because the real problem was this: when people used that term, because obviously the term can just mean to do with like time, etc. People took it as like, oh, so that means like you're making the game faster or slower because it was big time. Exactly. It's like, well, no, I'm not doing that. Like, because in that scenario, if you made it slow, but I'm a late game team, isn't that good for me? No, in this scenario, having the tempo was always what you wanted, obviously.
It's basically just control.
Yes.
Control over the game state. In a favorable way, right?
That's mega lacking in the West, mate. Instead, here's the difference. Even though, by the way, these teams used to be terrible. If you go and watch like Gen G when they win these games, mate, they fucking gorilla monkey stomp people to death. They're fucking insane how they close games out. Like, if people don't go look at like the amount of gold lead these guys have when they're like winning these games. It's ridiculous.
We'll talk about Gen G.
Snowballing out control.
We didn't have a show last week, so we couldn't talk about Gen G T1, which is clearly like an extremely important game on the world stage that we can discuss, especially because Gen G smashed T1 basically. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I think part of these games on 12-14 and part of the instability is that it's harder to kill dragons now, especially mountain dragons. Like, it takes a long ass time to kill them. They have a lot more HP. We don't know how much the more powerful buffs are going to prioritize teams, how much effect they're going to have on the game state. I mean, they made big changes. They basically doubled the power of a lot of these buffs, or increased it. I shouldn't say doubled, increased it by 50% a lot of the time. They increased the HP of the second Herald so that maybe you can get more done with it. They introduced these variables right before playoffs. I think that's because they wanted the maximum amount of time that teams. So they wanted to introduce it now so that teams could get used to it by playoffs. And also, I think this is the last major change they're probably going to make before Worlds. So that at least this is how it should be done, which is that playoffs are played on a pretty similar patch to the World Championship without any major changes being made. So you qualify the correct teams for Worlds in that particular meta. So I think the timing is pretty good. It's not even like 1 week before. You give teams a couple weeks before the playoffs to acclimate. So it seems like a pretty good timing if they're going to make these changes. But I think probably some of the volatility that we saw in Europe was a result of this patch, because it's a lot of meta champion changes, especially in the bot lane, which is like all of a sudden these Sivir changes are making Sivir very high priority, which then makes some other single target champions like Draven super high priority, who can bully the Sivir in the lane. We see a lot more Twitch these days. Zeri obviously still a presence. And now with SK beating Rogue, we're even starting to see some old Sivir counters, because Sivir hasn't been part of the meta for a very long time. Well, what was always a Sivir counter? It was Vayne. And because Sivir's kit hasn't changed, it's more like the fundamental kit hasn't changed. It's more the numbers based around her kit, as well as some other, minor tweaks to how these abilities work. But at a fundamental level, the reason why Vayne was powerful into Sivir is because Vayne can dodge a lot of, dodge Sivir's Q very easily. And Sivir's also low range. So Vayne, as a single target AD carry, can kind of win some of these duels with Sivir, as well as be very good when it comes to late game team fighting and eliminating tanks, right? And playing front to back team fights. So SK pulls out this champion that is also not meta. So we're seeing a pretty big shift, I would say, in the bottom lane. So all these factors together are combining into volatility. And until I don't think anybody knows how to play the proper way around these objectives now that they've been changed. And we're just going to have to wait for the dust to settle on this one. And you combine the fact that LCK and LPL are not even on this patch, right? So that's making it even more confusing in many ways.
One of my favorite, one of my guilty pleasures in League, Monte, would always be when LCK was a patch ahead, and then they would find a broken champion, and some idiot in EU LCS would force that when it was the pre-nerfed version, and they would just make it happen in the game. It's bro, that's not why they're playing it over there. It's a different champion.
So LPL actually did switch to 12-14 in the middle of last week.
Okay.
But it's very new. And LCK will not be on the new patch until this next week, I believe. So we do have to Yeah, they haven't actually announced that they're changing. LCK has not announced that they're changing to the new patch this week, but it has been interesting.
By the way, I've got an aside, because here's the thing. I mentioned it on Twitter, but I want to bring this up because I've done that thing again where the curse in esports, if you don't know, especially if you work behind the scenes, is if someone points out something annoying, Monte, you can never not see it again. So in the same way as like classic, like for example, obviously people have done this with a bunch of things like Freak done, etc. Like once you key in on the annoying thing about how they cast, it fucking ruins it. So one thing I've noticed that it's always been a minor peeve, but I've never verbalized it before. Monte, I'll give you a quick analogy. In CSGO, we have a similar thing I'm about to describe. It's essentially where casters, like a moth to the flame, cannot resist what becomes shit casting because you get caught in the hype of the moment and you don't actually cast. So the example in CSGO, you'll have seen it many times, is any time someone throws a grenade into an area they're not looking at and it's going to go into like a group of people, the caster obviously goes like, oh my, this grenade could be so good. And then let's say in CSGO, it does like 4 damage, you know, like goes behind a wall, doesn't do anything. So obviously then you're just like, it wasn't actually as great as he thought. But I get why, you know, the guy got drawn into the hype. Dude, the curse is this, because it happens in every game. Dude, it's when Western casters, when people start trying to start a Baron, please, Lord, save us from these fucking Western casters telling us every single Baron ever can be burned down quickly and that they're burning it down now. Like, you said that for every Baron I've ever seen in a 10-year span now, boys. Apparently there's no Baron ever that wasn't going to get completed, that was going down slowly, that isn't being hit and I know it's because you just go reverting into these loops that you go into, but like, guys, you got to get out of those. I've seen them now say it, Monte, when they're the Barons that are really hard to kill, like they're all 5 hitting it, it's still at like 2/3 health, and the other team's coming into the pit and they're going, this could burn down real quick. It can't, I'm telling you, I promise you, it can't burn down quicker. The ADC's hitting and everything. Like, I know it, because I want to ask you, because you're a caster, like, what do you think of that? Because it's just one of those loops I've noticed people just cannot stop getting trapped into.
I have heard occasionally, you know, people talking about that it's like slower to kill certain Barons, but also I think that it's just it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in this way, which is that if you have a team composition that kills Baron slowly, you're not going to try to burn it down quickly. So it just doesn't happen, right? Like they're not going to try and sneak that Baron. They're not going to just try and, you know, fake you out while you're doing Dragon. You know, all of a sudden you run to Baron, or you bait people into the bot lane and then you start doing it if there's enough time to walk across the entire map or for the other team to TP over to you. So most, I think, professional teams just won't do the Baron at that level unless they're fucking bad. So I think to a certain degree, I think it's to a certain degree, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy based on teams that can do Baron quickly are going to try and burn it down quickly. Like if you have a Nazir and a Jinx, like you're just going to go do the Baron as fast as you possibly can. Also, I think that it's probably true that many meta champs are meta because they do objectives quickly, because that is
in the modern day,
huge strategic advantage.
Of course.
So there are multiple factors, but yeah, I think in general, Baron really is pretty easy to do at the professional level for most teams, and maybe can be done too quickly a lot of the time. But in a way, I'm kind of happy it is, because otherwise we just see unending Baron dances where one team would start it and then just pull off. Like, you need to be able to kill it in a relatively short amount of time so you can actually commit to the objective and move the game state along. So,
you know, every now and then I love the universe, because I randomly just glanced over at Twitch chat and the person doing shitty comments has, out of their own volition, chosen to put an any key icon next to themselves. Go ahead, mate. You're a moron, so we don't mind what you say. Anyway, keep going with the episode. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.